I'm Amanda Prahl. I'm a playwright and lyricist, and I am here at Virtual JaneCon to talk to you a little bit about adapting Persuasion into a musical. I'm writing the book and the lyrics for a new adaptation, with composer Anna Marcus-Hecht doing all the music.
Hello, people of JaneCon. I'm Anna Marcus-Hecht, composer of Persuasion.
If you've been around Virtual JaneCon for a while, you might remember the very first con I presented my preview, my very first explorations of what it would be like to turn Persuasion into a musical. I've been working on this project for quite some time. I've always loved Jane Austen. When I was an undergraduate at Arizona State University, I took an Austen course with Professors Devney Lucer and George Justice. And when I went into grad school for playwriting, I began working on an adaptation of Persuasion. Devney and George continued to help me along with several of my other professors and mentors, and along the way I have this whole time been working on the libretto while trying to find a composer who would fit the project stylistically, who was interested in it, and who felt like a good fit to work together and bring this to life. It took a bit of a journey, but I recently connected with the Meister community, which brings together theater artists, musicians, writers, lyricists, all sorts, to connect with each other, find jobs, and work together on different projects. That's how Anna and I first met, and for the past several months we've been working together on putting Persuasion into song.
A little over a year ago, I got an email out of nowhere from Amanda saying that she found me on the Meister network and she wanted to see if we'd be compatible working together. I had recently graduated from the NYU musical theater writing program. I just finished my first stage reading of my thesis musical, and honestly, I was really ready for a new project. I've worked on a couple different shows before, but everything I've worked on before has really fully been my baby. My first show, I did book, music, and lyrics. Pretty much every part of it was my own writing. And even though my second show was done with a collaborator, the idea was originally mine, and I did a good chunk of the book on top of the music. Persuasion is really my first time coming onto a project that I didn't conceive of, and it's a really new experience. Not working on a project from the beginning means that there's a little bit of disconnect between me and the characters, so I gotta do a little bit of catch-up. I feel like I don't know the characters quite as well as Amanda does, even more so because it's an adaptation. We are just borrowing these characters from Jane Austen after all, so I just gotta approach it from a slightly different angle. I still let the lyrics write the music, as I always do, because I believe lyrics, honestly, know what they want to be said as, and it's my job just to sort of channel my knowledge of music through those lyrics. But I've been doing a lot of deferring to Amanda when it comes to the general vibe we're going off of, what she's thinking of for each character's musical style and whatnot.
So we're going to give you a little preview today of a handful of our songs and tell you a bit about the process behind each one.
We really hope you enjoy what we have to offer.
The first song we're going to show you today is a song called Bloom. It's a solo, it's for Anne, and it comes pretty early in the story. This actually was the very first song that I wrote for Persuasion. It was the first song that Anna set to music when we started working together, and it's kind of become the center or the guiding point of the entire adaptation. For me at least, Anne was really the way into the story, because when you think about Jane Austen, you probably think more about the brighter, the lighter stories. The Pride and Prejudice, Emma, characters falling in love for the first time. Persuasion's a little bit different. It's one of her later stories, and it shows. It's more mature. It's about characters who are a little bit older. Anne's 27, Wentworth's around 30. They're characters who have had time to have regrets, to have heartbreaks, to wish that they could maybe have done something differently. It's more of a story of second chances between people who have made mistakes and have grown since then. Austen uses the phrase bloom repeatedly to describe Anne, as in the idea that the bloom has gone off the rose. When we're first introduced to Anne, we're greeted with this description. A few years before, Anne Elliot had been a very pretty girl, but her bloom had vanished early. We keep up with this thread from time to time. When we hear about her former relationship with Wentworth, for instance, we get, a few months had seen the beginning and the end of their acquaintance, but not with a few months ended Anne's share of suffering from it. Her attachments and regrets had, for a long time, clouded every enjoyment of youth, and an early loss of bloom and spirits had been their lasting effect. Throughout the story, we feel that Anne's not the only one who knows that her bloom has gone. She accepts it, but other characters look at it as well, and it's often placed in contrast with others like Wentworth. After they've met again for the first time, she says this, No, the years which had destroyed her youth and bloom had only given him a more glowing, manly, open look, in no respect lessening his personal advantages. In this, we see that Anne's aging is seen as taking the bloom off. She's declined. She has lived a very emotionally difficult life up till now, in contrast with Wentworth, who has only gotten better with age, who has only become more confident and more powerful. But then, with time, Anne starts to emerge from her shell. Later on in the story, Wentworth notes an apparent stranger, who we later find out is Mr. Elliot, more to come, and Austen uses one of her favorite literary techniques, free and direct discourse, to give us an oblong peek into Wentworth's observation of this moment. She was looking remarkably well, her very regular, very pretty features, having the bloom and freshness of youth, restored by the fine wind which had been blowing on her complexion, and by the animation of eye which it had also produced. It was evident that the gentleman admired her exceedingly. Captain Wentworth looked round at her instantly in a way which showed his noticing of it. He gave her a momentary glance, a glance of brightness which seemed to say, "That man is struck with you, and even I, at this moment, see something like Anne Elliot again." That image, that idea of blooming, was so vibrant it absolutely had to become a lyric. It also gave me access to something very important, which was Anne's I Want song. That's the moment that's completely pivotal to any hero or heroine in musical theater. Early in the story, they have to sing about what they want. That lets us know who they are, what their journey is, and what we should be rooting for them to get to. The danger with Persuasion at that point is that it's easy for Anne to come across as almost a figure of pity, a Cinderella almost. But that approach takes away her agency. Instead, I saw her as someone vibrant and complicated, just bursting with so much feeling, but having learned the hard way that she's just not allowed to feel that deeply, that she even now proactively ruins her own hopes just to avoid getting her hopes up. It's gotten to the point where she has to ask, does she even know what she wants at this point? And her answer is, yes, I do. I want the chance to bloom into my full self that I've never gotten the chance to before. And to me, that is a very interesting and mature way to approach this character, and it became the guiding motif, both lyrically and musically, for Anne and for Persuasion as a whole.
Bloom was actually my introduction to Persuasion. Before I was brought onto the project in full, Amanda sent me some lyrics for me to set to see if my style would be compatible for what she's looking for the project. And I came back with what is Anne's signature musical style and honestly the most important leitmotif of the show. The tune for A Rose No More in Bloom, that do, re, mi, te, sol, honestly comes back over and over throughout the show. One of my favorite parts of writing a musical is weaving together all the songs through a web of leitmotifs. Often, these motifs sort of write themselves. For example, the Bloom motif was written for Bloom, it'll come back in the Bloom reprise, but it also appears a couple times in the opening number. When I took a look at Amanda's lyrics and saw that there was a line that said, "Gone while still in bloom," it was just asking to be put there. Sometimes it'll just appear in places that have the same number of syllables. In the same song, Anne sings a line, "You may think, but how?" It's an Anne line. She just sang about the hope she had in her youth. It's 5 syllables. It was just asking to go there. The musical inspiration I was asked to go off of for Anne's music was a cross between Adele and Amy Winehouse. Something dark, creamy, introspective, but undeniably powerful. One thing I've been focusing on with the way I write Anne is that, range-wise, she's a true alto. Not a mezzo with a low extension, not someone who is asked to live around a G3 but expected to belt an E5. No, a true alto. There's a problem in musical theater writing where romantic leads are expected to sing higher and higher, the excitement in the song coming from the height of the notes. But I've been trying to write compelling songs for Anne that don't depend on the singer being able to belt up in the stratosphere. Some of the most interesting songs out there have a range of only around 1.5 octaves, so why can't I do that here?
They take and they take, never claim their mistakes, even when I might break. Hold my head up high, let time go by, learn to live, not fly. Grow up with love, they assume, they say, look how she blooms. Those days are gone, and I've moved on. Don't think I'm woe begone. because I'm cursed, but I'll allow my dreams somehow to be disavowed. After all this time, would I even know what you want anymore? Songs that don't quite rhyme, the rose no more. And after all this time, would I even know what you want anymore? Songs that don't quite rhyme, the rose no more. In no more, no more, no more, rose no more.
The next song you're going to hear is called To the Victor Go the Spoils. It's a group number, still in Act 1, and we're at one of the balls where Wentworth has just come back into society. Underlying Persuasion is this idea of making one's fortune in the war, of the spoils of war. Austen describes young Wentworth's turn in fortune through this. He distinguishes himself in the Navy, he gains rank, and he must now, by have successive captures, have made a handsome fortune. To be sure, there's another way to approach this in Adaptation that is more serious, more critical of institutions of the time. In the text that we have, though, I would argue Persuasion largely looks on the Navy as a positive thing, as a positive profession. It's the way in which two of our most likable characters, Wentworth and his brother-in-law, Admiral Croft, make their fortunes. And the only character who looks down on the Navy as a profession is the very silly Sir Walter, who complains more about how it makes men terribly sunburnt than anything about British military policy. So that informed my approach to this song, which wound up being more of a fun, upbeat number after we've had a much more serious introduction to the story through Anne. There's something just very amusing to me about the idea of a girl group deliberately reappropriating the language of war, which is a very serious and traumatizing thing in fiction or no, but they take it and twist it for their romantic pursuits. The language of love as metaphorical war, or war using the language of love, that's a pop music tradition, and honestly, it goes way further back than just modern pop music. So I wanted to play with that a little bit here and flip the script. These lyrics give us the idea that the men return from war enriched by the spoils, but now they become the prize in turn, and maybe they're not entirely prepared for that. So that's what we have going here.
Ah yes, the girl group. My excuse to do one of my favorite things, 3-part treble harmony. This song might be Louise's introduction, but it shows off the shared goals of the three characters through their layered harmonies. This song is actually made up of a couple different cannibalized parts from an older musical that I've all but scrapped. The great thing about killing your darlings is you can use their body parts to Frankenstein together something new. The first part I took is the piano group that's underneath everything. It doesn't have any particular meaning, it's just upbeat and fun and I like it. But the other thing I took from this other show was the chord progression. Specifically, the use of the major flat 2 chord. This chord, sometimes referred to as a Neapolitan chord in classical music, has a super bright feel, and honestly, I always feel it gives a sort of air of bitchiness. The girls in To the Victor Go the Spoils might be the prize for some sailor, but he's the prize for them as well. They aren't looking to marry for love, they're looking for a man with money and prestige to elevate their already high status, which is completely juxtaposed to Anne's desire to find love that makes her happy. I had to add that bitchy, overconfident flat 2 chord to sort of drive that goal home.
War can be so messy, violence and strife, but there can be a benefit if you escape with your life. When a ship is captured, the riches can be yours. Then you become the prize in turn when you return to our shores. Love's a bitch, love's a war, so they say. That's the old cliche. So to the victor go the spoils. To the victor go the spoils. Whoa, 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 whoa. Surely he has seen things no one can forget. But if I can just handle him, I'll fix him right up, you bet. Our duty is to wait patiently. We deserve our share share, our share. Love's a bitch, love's a war, so they say. Love's a war, so they, that's the old cliche. So to the victor go the spoils. To the victor go the spoils. Whoa, 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 whoa. War can be so messy, fight to be the best, and I cannot let one of them stop me on my quest. I could end up like Anne, past her prime and meek. She could have had her chance if she wasn't weak. Love's a bitch, love's a war, so they say. Love's a bitch, love's a war, so they, that's the old cliche. So to the victor go the spoils. So to the victor go the spoils. 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 The spoils, the spoils, the spoils. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
The next song is called Now You've Seen Him. It's a duet between Anne and Wentworth. Set in Act 1, it's just after that moment where Anne and Wentworth have come across each other for the first time since their ill-fated relationship years ago. This is another song that digs a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of musical theater structure. There's a type of love song called the conditional love song. It's a dramatic device where the characters sing about how they might love each other, but use conditional phrasing so that it's an if, not a absolute. They give themselves plausible deniability, and it builds a little bit more dramatic tension. If you're familiar with Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, you probably are familiar with this. Think of People Will Say We're in Love. Think of If I Loved You from Carousel. The idea is to give audiences the setup of the relationship and kind of hint where it's going, but it also highlights whatever it is that's keeping these characters apart. It builds up the tension, and it gets the audience to root for this couple by giving them a sneak preview. We know something that they don't. What I found interesting, though, as I was working on Persuasion, was the opportunity to tackle this kind of song from a little bit different angle. Anne and Wentworth don't need an if I loved you moment. There is no if. They already know that they have loved each other and they've lost each other. There's this wonderful moment in the book where we get inside of Anne's head right after that second, right after she and Wentworth have first encountered each other for the first time. And she basically says, oh, okay, the worst part is over. We've seen each other again. That was the hard part. To me, that gave me a lyrical opportunity for one of these not love songs, but one that's not looking forward at a hypothetical if, but one that's looking backwards. So I shaped the lyrics around kind of two forms of looking back. One, looking back just a few minutes ago at the painful awkwardness of this re-meeting. And second, looking back all the way to how things used to be between them. The feelings are still there, of course, even though Anne is the only one who's able to admit it at this point. So their lyrics reflect that. Anne she's already in touch with her feelings. She's thinking about all of these things. Wentworth's looking a little bit back and remembering how he used to feel and comparing it to how he feels now. It just intrigued me to take this very deeply emotional moment between the two characters, pair it up with this piece of musical theater structure, and kind of turn it on its head for something that hopefully gets us a good, powerful peek at where these characters are right now.
If you're used to doing creative work on your own, you don't always think about how much back and forth goes into a collaborative work like a musical. This is one of those songs where we did lots of back and forth. When you write lyrics, especially if you're not the one setting the lyrics, it's really easy to not think about how they're gonna sound when they're sung. The chorus of the song originally had Anne singing Now I've Seen Him while Wentworth sang Now I've Seen Her, which makes total sense. It's the title of the song, it's what's happening here, why wouldn't they sing that? Well, the issue comes when they sing him and her at the same time. I didn't catch this until I'd already set the text. I sat down to record, and the two vowels clashed like really awkwardly. They were hard to tune, and I kept accidentally singing hem during Anne's part to sort of overcompensate for that awkwardness. I mentioned this to Amanda at our next collab meeting, and then she came back with a new lyric that honestly fits way better. And here we are. There have been numerous times where either I've offered feedback on a lyric or Amanda's offered feedback on a melody, and that's what helps this feel like a really coherent work, not just two artists' works jammed together.
It's over. The worst is over. We've been once more in the same room. Now I've seen it. I must reason. Try to feel it less. I don't want to, but I want him. Still I must confess. Deserted and disappointed then, but that time has passed. Time moves slowly on, the skies beyond, not quite a haven. Things I can't forget, so small and yet could make me cave in. And defenseless, now it's senseless, but the ache may last. I was burning, world keeps turning. Keep it in the past. Set above me once. Now just look at us, how the tables have turned. Time moves slowly on, the skies beyond, not quite a haven. Things I can't forget, so small and yet could make me cave in. Then defenseless, now it's senseless, but the ache may last. I was burning, world keeps turning. Keep it in the past, won't stay in the past. In the past.
Our next song is called A Habit of the Heart. It's about midway through Act 1, and this is Wentworth's first solo of the show. One of the things I love about the romance arc in Persuasion is that these two characters have very different journeys. Anne doesn't need to realize that she's still in love with Wentworth. She already knows it. She accepts that from the very beginning. Her journey is more of one of self-empowerment, self-realization, gaining courage so that she can finally stand up for herself, stand up for what she wants, and commit in a way that she couldn't in the past. It's Wentworth who has to come back around to actually acknowledging his feelings. When we first meet him, he's in a place that's kind of familiar even today. He's seeing the ex who broke his heart. He's a little bit pleased with himself. She's not doing well. He's become successful. Specifically, he's become successful after he was told that he wasn't good enough. And there's this very human, very relatable sense of just a wee bit of smugness, not in a way that makes him unlikable or unpleasant, but just in the sense that you can't help feeling a little bit satisfied. He was turned away for not being good enough, and now look who's doing better than the other. But he's still our hero. He's still fundamentally a very good man. And deep down, he still cares about Anne. He can't stand to see her hurt. And that's where we get some of his conflict, especially earlier in the story. There's that great moment in the book, well, actually a couple of moments in the book, where he alone notices that Anne needs assistance. We have the moment where he takes her nephew away from her when the child is climbing all over and overwhelming her. We have the moment where they're out walking and he alone notices that maybe she should take the Crofts up on the offer to get in the carriage and go back with them. Even though she protests, because remember, this is Anne, she recoils at the idea of being an inconvenience to anyone, let alone Wentworth. But he insists on helping her anyway. does this a couple of times, but this specific song takes place in the moment where he helps her into the carriage. I give it a little bit of a tweak in the story, but the idea is still the same. The interesting thing here is that Austen very rarely gives us lengthy, detailed insights into her male characters' heads, and certainly not as long or in-depth as our heroines. But this is a musical, and to really connect with a main character, we have to hear them sing. That's how the art form works. That's how the story works. I realized when we were writing a pretty early draft that Wentworth didn't actually sing solo until almost the end of the show. And we needed some other moment for him earlier on so that audiences could connect with him. But here's the complicating thing. A big part of the tension in the show, in the story overall, is that Anne doesn't know how Wentworth is feeling. She doesn't know how his feelings are changing. So should the audience, should we not? How do we maintain that dramatic tension? I came back to this moment and I realized it was actually a great beat to try to explore that emotional inner turmoil. Anne is still uncertain of his feelings and we still need to be. So how do we do that? Lyrically, we make him uncertain. I leaned into that. Even he doesn't really know how he feels. And so he has this very chaotic moment where he's not sure what he's doing or what he's feeling. All he knows is that he is confused. And that's where we land with this song.
This is one of my favorite songs I've written for the show so far. It's one of the most harmonically interesting ones, and it does something really interesting harmonically where it inverts one of Anne's signature harmonic moves. Anne's music, which you heard in Bloom, is primarily in a minor key, but she uses a borrowed major 4 chord to sort of brighten up the sound. Conversely, Habit of the Heart is in a major key, but it uses a borrowed minor 4 chord to darken the sound. Anne is a character who's been dealt a lot of misfortune throughout her life, but this story is sort of a light in the dark, something that can give her a little bit of hope. While Wentworth is in a period of great fortune right now, but being reminded of Anne is sort of a dark in his light. I do want to apologize to the tenors of the world in advance. A few minutes ago I was talking about the lack of altos in musical theater and the danger of mezzo-belters creeping up higher and higher. Well, tenor creep is just as prevalent, if not more, and here I am showing off a tenor song that features a C5. A falsetto C5, albeit, but still. I do intend to reach out to some tenor vocalists to talk about whether or not I need to bring the song down. Consulting musicians about instruments you don't play is another important bit of collaboration when it comes to writing a musical.
There's a certain satisfaction in seeing what's become of somebody who broke your heart in two. A little jolt of joy to see them floundering, to brush off the pain of deja vu. And yet I can't deny one instinct has not run dry. A habit of the heart now has me all unmoored, finally on the verge, ready to emerge when the urge to help her confounds me, wanting to rejoice in how both our fortunes changed, yet a habit of the heart leaves me feeling strange. Should I think of it as weakness after all she's done? Should I keep giving the cold shoulder? So her strength had gone, so she seemed in pain. Why should it be me who consoled her? And still I can't stand by, even as I wonder why. A habit of the heart now has me all unmoored. I was on the move with the need to prove what we had was once behind me. Though I cannot ignore her, I still reach out my hand. But that habit of the heart is hard to understand. Hard to understand. Or maybe not.
Our next song is Turning the Page, and this is the first one that is for someone outside of our main characters that we're showing you today. This one is a solo for Captain Bennick, our melodramatic poetry king. When I first approached Persuasion, in general, there was just something about Bennick and Louise's arc that drew me in a little bit, which I think maybe is a little uncommon, but something spoke to me in it. It happens almost entirely in the background because both of them are obsessed with someone else throughout most of the story. Bennick is still thinking about his late fiancée, Louisa is pursuing Wentworth, but I like the idea that, in the end, they're kind of kindred spirits. It's not just a narrative device to pair the spares so that Anne and Wentworth can go off and have their happily ever after. So, naturally, our angsty poet captain needs to have a song of his own to express himself in words. Surprisingly, it was actually a bit of a lyrical challenge because I have to find a way to convey his fundamental romanticism and love for poetry and his angst without making him seem silly, over the top, or out of touch among these more serious, realist characters that we have throughout the rest of the story. So I landed on that conversation that Bennick has with Anne about the truth or not so much about what's written in poems, where he sits around and he kind of realizes, because Anne tells him, and she's someone that he likes, respects, sees as intelligent and thoughtful, and she reminds him, all of these poems, all these things that are said about women and love, who writes them? Men. Do we really think that they're charitable? Maybe not. So I wanted to see this idea of not quite disillusionment, but rethinking that poetic approach to life. I wanted to put that earlier in his arc. I feel like his story can kind of draw parallels with what maybe a lot of creative people feel sometimes. Sometimes it really sucks that the real world isn't like the fictional ones that we love, isn't like the worlds we create with tidy emotions and happily ever afters and ways to deal with things all in a beautifully wrapped up way. He's struggling to find his place right now. He's struggling to resolve this internal conflict because his ideals, his romanticism, all of these poems are coming face to face with the fact that his life is not turning out in that romantic way. He has lost his fiancée, and he can mourn and write mourning poetry all he likes. That's not going to improve his life. So what comes next? He doesn't need to lose his romanticism. He absolutely shouldn't. That would be taking away part of his character. But he needs to learn to moderate and balance it. So that's where this song kind of comes from lyrically. It's about him struggling to find his place and trying to make sense of a world that perhaps doesn't make sense, at least not through the lens he's used to looking at.
Bennick is trapped in the past, and musically, what's more trapped in the past than a jazz ballad? While both Anne and Wentworth sing in a more modern style, Bennick has a very early 20th century jazz standard flavor to his sound. In the tradition of jazz standards, I built the chord progression for Turning the Page off of another jazz standards chord progression. Autumn Leaves, to be specific. The series of descending 2/5 patterns on the chorus doesn't just bring to mind the image of a 1940s jazz ballad, it's torn directly from one. A lot of my own musical training's in jazz, actually. My first singing outside of a choir was singing jazz ballads. I was a saxophonist for 12 years. I've studied jazz piano and jazz arranging, so this one was a really fun one to work on.
A pen in hand, the right hand can find words that may express the thoughts a man cannot command his soul song more or less. And yet everything seems so noble on the page, full of truths like some wisdom from a sage. The grief and the terror and the pain, but nothing as unseemly as rage. So I turn the page once more, looking for an explanation as to why my whole foundation feels less steady than before. Ink and pen and permanence, a world of tidy consequence. Let me one all around me flying high. When people who want it much less surpass me, it stings, I confess. Beginning and middle and end, familiar as an old friend, something to cling to, old songs to sing to, a story I now must amend. So I turn the page once more, looking for the right solution, or perhaps an absolution for the grief I can't ignore. Ink and pen and permanence, a world of tidy consequence. Let me live there. Let me live there.
The last song we're going to show you today is called Lady Elliot. It's the only song from Act 2, and it is by far the hardest one for me out of all the songs that we're showing you today, and probably out of most of the show, to be honest. So we're in Act 2 now. At this point in the plot, Lady Russell is back. Anne is back with her father and with Elizabeth. The Mr. Elliot plot has been set into motion, and Lady Russell is back in play, and she's up to, let's say, up to her old tricks. She absolutely loves the idea of Anne marrying Mr. Elliot. But it's not just a snobbery thing, and that's what's important here. She really, genuinely thinks that it would be perfect for Anne to be Lady Elliot, the way her mother was before her, the way that she thinks Anne should be. Lady Russell is a tricky character to read, and an even trickier one to try to adapt, because she's antagonistic to the goal that we all want, which is Anne and Wentworth getting back together. But she's not bad per se. She's not the villain of the piece. She just thinks that she absolutely knows best, and that's that, and she's pushy about it. She's also nosy as all hell, which is a lot of fun to play with, and like I mentioned earlier, that's something that we need a little bit more of. We need a few of those lighter, more comic moments when a lot of the show is somewhat serious. But actually pinning down her voice, finding her lyrical style, finding what she sounds like in a musical sense, was a lot harder for me than with the other characters. Honestly, I couldn't tell you why. All I know is it was a struggle. So I wanted to have the lyrics for this song kind of tiptoe along that line between almost villain and just plain old well-intentioned meddler. So in these lyrics, you'll hear a lot of Lady Russell evoking the memory of Anne's mother. And it's important to realize that's not just a cheap shot. It's not just an attempt at manipulation. It really is at the heart of what Lady Russell deeply, truly believes is Anne's best interest. I think it's hard for Lady Russell, as a parental figure of sorts, to see Anne as a grown-up making her own decisions, forming her own opinions. There's still something a little bit sweet, a lot frustrating about the idea that she still kind of sees Anne as the teenager who, in her mind, she had to save from making a mistake with Wentworth. And Lady Russell certainly isn't at the point yet where she can admit that maybe she's the one who made the mistake. So we end up with this song, a little bit manipulative, a little bit well-intentioned, and hopefully a little bit fun too.
When Amanda first gave me these lyrics and we were discussing the sound we were looking for Lady Russell, we were tossing around the idea of the classic Disney villain song. Things like Mother Knows Best from Tangled, that kind of flavor. It gave me the opportunity to play around with something a little more sinister, a little more overdramatic than some of the other songs. Also, Lady Russell is the one and only true soprano in the entire cast, which really stands out in a sea of altos and mezzos. Lady Elliot isn't the only song in the show that has a very referential sound. Pretty much all the characters have a very distinctive pastiche sound, a sound that references an older musical style. William Elliot, Anne's cousin, has a sound that references 60s Beatles songs, really leaning on that 4-chord. Admiral Croft and Mrs. Croft have a song that sounds very similar to an old sitcom theme, complete with a jaunty piano and a goofy bass line. And, along the same lines, Lady Russell's sound pulls from the same dark cabaret background that a lot of Disney villain songs pull from. using plenty of secondary dominance, a tango beat, and lots of overdramatic vocals.
I still can remember your dear mother's face. Nothing would be sweeter than to see you in her place. Your family lacks vision, so they push you aside, but your next decision will have them all green-eyed. And I say, it's your time now, if you just allow yourself to be the gracious, vivacious, tenacious Lady Elliot. Just think of how grand your life would be. Worries all gone so you can be carefree. Think of how right it all would be for you to succeed. Set the paradigm, don't be afraid to climb. It's your time to be Lady Elliot. The man himself matters little. Focus instead on the prize. My dearest dream is to see you happy and fed, wealthy and wise. Fate is so often fickle, men even more so. All that I've done has been to secure a life for you that holds such a lore. Nothing on earth would give me such joy as seeing you join the hoi polloi. Live out this dream your mother would beam to see you as Lady Elliot. Only the best will do for my Anne. Someday she'll see and she'll understand. The world is cruel, but money makes rules, and the rest are all fortune's fools. Her future set, never again fret if she becomes Lady Elliot. Just think of how grand her life would be. Worries all gone so I can be carefree. Just think of how right it all would be. A suitable ending. Restored to her rightful place, and she'll have me to thank when her right is Lady Elliot. Lady Elliot. Lady Elliot.
Thanks for joining us today to talk a little bit about our musical adaptation of Persuasion. We hope you enjoyed our first sneak peek at our upcoming musical. Please feel free to stay in touch with us, whether you have comments, questions, or just want to keep up with the project as it keeps going. You can find us at the links in our video description. Thanks again for joining us, and be sure to check out the rest of the amazing programming the rest of this weekend at Virtual Jane Con. Thanks.